Welcome back, everybody. It's day number 3 for E3 2019 here from Los Angeles, California. My name is Jump, and it is time to get our D&D fix going. As I'm joined, of course, by my co-host here, Andrew Renee. Hello and welcome. Good morning.
Good morning to you, too.
And we've got Sven Vinka, the CEO of Larian Studios, as well as Mike Morrow's franchise creative director. Gentlemen, how are you doing this morning as you tell us it is your first and last interview of the day?
Happy to go home, to be honest. We've been doing the promotion for this game 13 days in a row now. So this is literally the last interview. So maybe you'll catch us off guard and learn something that nobody else has been able to use out of us.
Scoops, I'm ready.
Yeah, you say your deflection skills are pretty on par right now. Baldur's Gate 2 came out November of 2013. It's been a while since the last one. How'd you guys get together, and what's the thought process here for Baldur's Gate 3?
Okay. So, well, Baldur's Gate 2, the original, actually came out in 2000.
Okay,
so
yeah, sorry, I'm thinking...
You mixed with an expansion.
Yeah,
that was
you're
done
right.
later.
Yeah, that was my fault.
So don't worry about it. So it's been almost 20 years in the making. So there's a lot of expectation around this game, because for a lot of people this was their first CRPG, computer role-playing game that they ever played. And so, yeah, we're going to try to match those expectations. Maybe even surpass them, who knows?
I think you're definitely going to surpass expectations. There was obviously a lot of excitement on the internet when there was rumors that Baldur's Gate 3 was in the works. And I don't think anybody saw Larian being involved. And you guys had this amazing reveal at the Google Stadia presentation. So how did you guys, start working on this? Like, was it like you had mentioned that you were just a fan of this franchise for a long time and that this is what you wanted to do. When you found out you were going to kind of get the keys to the kingdom, was like the first thing that went through your head?
Well, we've been trying to get it for quite some time. We shipped a game called Divinity Original Sin 1 in 2014, and that was the first time that I head over to Wizards of the Coast, and I said, why don't you give me Baldur's Gate 3? And they said,
Did you have to butter them up with lots of gifts?
I know, but I kept on talking. We talked about what the vision was for the game, and they... at some point, they called us back, which was in 2016. They said, you should come over now and have dinner. And we went to a shady restaurant, and they had this,
Shady restaurant.
they had this big stack of paper that they passed under the table. And they said, look at this. And it said Baldur's Gate 3. Then I looked, and it contained pretty much everything that we'd been talking about all this time. And so they say, we want to show this to our board. Do you still want to do it? And I said, yes, of course I still want to do it. And here we are now.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. So obviously Divinity Original Sin 2, you guys did the definitive edition, late last year. So was it hard to maybe put that aside and work on this? Or were you guys like, we're ready to give Divinity a little bit of a break for a while?
Yeah, I think there's... when we announced it to the team, we had like 2 reactions. The first of one was the guys and the girls that remembered the game. So they were ecstatic. And then we had a younger generation that was wondering, what is that? All right. And so that was eye-opening, actually, because we always thought that everybody knows Baldur's Gate. So we had to do some explaining, but by now they know it. But everybody was really happy that we could delve into Dungeons & Dragons, an IP that has been around for 45 years, which had some of the finest minds in fantasy work on it, and has been an inspiration to pretty much the entire games industry. So it's really cool to be able to work on it.
Now, for the saga that we can see, obviously we only got a 60-second trailer there, but from the Dungeons & Dragons side of it, what can we potentially expect from Baldur's Gate 3 in relation from that second rendition?
Yeah, so a lot of, for us, we see Baldur's Gate as having its own saga that spans across the tabletop game and now into computer games. Obviously, then Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 in the past. And so for us, Baldur's Gate 3 represents the next chapter in the story. But before then, we actually have a tabletop game campaign coming out September 17.
Okay.
It's going to basically give you an update on the city. If you haven't played a Baldur's Gate game since Baldur's Gate 1 or 2, or if you don't know anything about Baldur's Gate and want to understand like why is everyone so excited, that's the best place to check out the lore, the story, the history, and the characters. Plus, we have an entire level 1 to 13 campaign that you can play through in the tabletop role-playing game.
That's awesome. I actually have just started getting into D&D. I had my second game ever at PAX East. We have some really great members of our community who put it together for us, and shout out to those guys for DMing like bosses. For people like you had mentioned that aren't familiar with the D&D rule set, like, are they going to be able to kind of get familiarized through Baldur's Gate 3. You guys had
Yeah.
mentioned that you're working off the 5th generation, right?
Yeah, it's 5th edition is the rule set, but I mean that's very much the purpose of the video game. So if you look at that teaser trailer, it works at 2 levels. If you don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, you are going to see a guy who has a problem. He's turning into some alien kind of creature. You see something flying in the background, and so you understand that there's an invasion of the body snatchers going on. But if you know Dungeons and Dragons, you will see, oh, that's Baldur's Gate, that's the Basilisk Gate, that guy is a member of the Flaming Fist, behind him is the tavern called the Blushing Mermaid. He is going through the process of Ceramorphosis, which is the fancy term for saying what's happening to him, but it's too fast. Why is it going so fast? Oh my God, it's a Mind Flayer. So you recognize all these things, and the same thing will go for the video game. When you're going to start playing it and you've never played it, it's going to be a great introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. But if you've played Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to see plenty of references to things that you know. There's going to be plenty of lore, and like this, we hope a lot of players will discover what it means to play Dungeons and Dragons.
There's clearly a huge backstory and lots to work with when you think about the Dungeons and Dragons, just universe as a whole. What sort of ways are you trying to inject the creative theories of Larian Studios specifically with Baldur's Gate 3 while keeping the integrity of Baldur's Gate and the originality that Wizards of the Coast were able to create?
So one of the things that's been really cool about working together is that we have very similar philosophies. When you look what Mike and his team do when they make a campaign, they basically give you a reason to go on an adventure, you create your character, and then they throw challenges at you. And they give you the book, which has a whole bunch of systems with which you can overcome those challenges. And then they also ask you to use your imagination to figure out how you're going to deal with the things that the Game Master throws at you. And then the Game Master rolls with whatever you came up with. When we make the video game, specifically what we did in Divinity Original Sin, we did exactly the same thing. We gave you a whole bunch of systems. Players had a lot of freedom in how they combined those systems to overcome the challenges that were thrown at them. So when we started working together, it felt like he was part of my team, and you've been saying like we were part of your team. So.
Oh yeah, it was seamless. Yeah, it just felt like in some ways it's actually. I'm learning it may have been a little bit a hindrance because I didn't realize how big this was going to be until I think it was like 2 p.m. yesterday. I realized, wait, we're making Baldur's Gate 3.
Just yesterday.
I am totally freaking out now. Right? Like it was so easy, but now it's really hard. And so yeah, it's a little overwhelming because it was just so you made it too easy. You should have been a little bit harder on me.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say there's still time for that.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
That's very true.
Do you feel, though, that the integrations of the backstories and those mechanics that you were able to have in Divinity are going to be able to help you kind of build these character profiles throughout Baldur's Gate 3 now that you have the plethora of information from Dungeons & Dragons?
Yeah, so one of the cool things about working on this is that when we made Divinity Original Sin, we had to create everything from scratch. We didn't have a world. We had to build everything on top of it. Here we have a whole bunch of world building. These guys work day in, day out just to bring us worlds. And then now we can use those worlds to tell stories in. So we can focus much more on the storytelling. And so what we did in Divinity Original Sin is we found a way of doing storytelling that works both in single player and multiplayer so that you can play it cooperatively, which is pretty much how you would play the tabletop. And so now we can really focus on that in Baldur's Gate 3. So I think people will find that there's a lot of fun to be had in creating their own stories together with their friends or on their own in ways that they hadn't probably experienced yet in another game.
That's really awesome. I do want to ask a little bit of a tech question. So you think D&D, pen and paper, old tech. And you guys announced with Google Stadia, which is kind of like the bleeding edge of where gaming, is going right now. So is there anything that you guys had to change about your approach when you started talking to Google about working with Stadia from a game developer standpoint?
So I found out about Google Stadia literally a year ago at this show in front of a hotel next door. And so I started chasing them and said that we need to chat to each other. And the reason why was I've always believed that game streaming had a very big future. And for games like us, we go to shows like these, or we go to PAX, for instance, and then inevitably what happens is we put a computer there, we put Divinity Original Sin, you always see somebody drag their friend, put them in front of it, and then after they finish playing it, they buy it. And when you talk to them, you realize that they actually, I thought these CRPGs were too complicated for me, but now that I've tried it, I want more of it. So technology like Google Stadia has the ability to send a link to each other. You click on it and you're playing instantly. And what's even better, you're instantly in the game of your body. And so like this, I hope that the genre that we are making is going to spread very, very easily. And on top of that, because we make cooperative multiplayer campaigns that they take a long time to play, some people spend a year playing them because they have to find the time to sit together behind the computer or their console. With Google Stadia, you'll be able to do it on any screen, and that's a very big thing.
It's also interesting just to see that development from the Dungeons & Dragons side as well, because especially in the last few years, you've seen the rise of players playing Dungeons & Dragons not in the same place, not in the same room. That, I mean, you take a look at streaming and content across the world, you're seeing these rise of players that are thousands of miles apart, but they're still getting that opportunity to enjoy the love of tabletop.
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting to see, because I think one of the things we hear about tabletop games, what people like about them, is you just have like this standing social appointment. Like every week,
yeah.
That's what you're looking forward to. You're going to see your friends, and then kind of the nice thing about it is, since it's an ongoing story, you kind of have that excuse. Like I know, like with my wife, maybe it's like, hey, if I miss this week, I'm going to miss the fight against the dragon. So it helps kind of insulate. Like this is something you don't want to mess with in terms of your schedule, because it's such a tabletop games are such a fun way to connect with people. So.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost out of time, but Mike, I wanted to ask, you guys obviously have tons of stuff going on at Wizards of the Coast. Do you guys have, besides the campaign in September, anything else you guys are working on?
So we really lots of Baldur's Gate 3s. I mean, we're still working on some of the story support, and again, because for us it's all Dungeons and Dragons, right? It doesn't matter where you play. Though, yeah, we got the next tabletop campaign September 17th. I made sure I get that date out there. But I mean that's for us D&D. It's what's really exciting about it is bringing D&D to a new audience, right? Because to us, it's all Dungeons and Dragons. There's no difference between tabletop, between video games. It's all one world, one story, bringing people together to fight monsters and grab loot. So.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our time. Sven and Mike, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Don't forget, September 17th, get your hands on the new tabletop from Dungeons & Dragons. That's going to do it for us for now. We're going to take ourselves a quick break. When we return, more action from E3 and the Facebook gaming stage. We'll see you in a bit.